What does joining Hip Hop Now's Patreon mean? It means supporting the kind of hip-hop content that keeps you updated on the latest hip-hop news and moves. It means supporting the production of content like That Time in Hip Hop and Hip Hop Now Reviews. It means you care about the conversation and preservation of hip-hop music and culture. Hip Hop Now Patreon supporters get access to bonus content, merchandise, and more. Support the movement. Become a supporter of Hip Hop Now podcast today at patreon.com/Hip Hop Now.
Coming up on this week's episode of Hip Hop Now podcast, Pusha T and Jay-Z got the streets talking with a new song. Action Bronson wants his respect on his new album. And the new Black Star album is finally dropping. I've been waiting for it. Madlib has produced it. I hope it's not whack. Let's do it.
Let's get right to the business.
Read these headlines. This album must be gone. This album must be gone.
Classic album.
Come to Hip Hop Podcast. What up, y'all? I am your host, Vegas, and this is Hip Hop Now Podcast, a podcast designed to catch you up on all things hip-hop, music, and culture that happened throughout the week. Big shout out to the producers of this podcast over at patreon.com/Hip Hop Now. They are the ones that support. They are the ones that make it happen. And if you would like to know what that is all about, visit patreon.com/Hip Hop Now, or you can scroll down on your favorite podcasting app that you're listening to this podcast to right now and click on the link in the description. Big shout out to hiphopdx.com, allhiphop.com, djbooth.net, XXL Magazine, and a couple of places where I'm getting some of these stories from. Let's get right into the business. So, hip-hop pioneer, you know him, I know him, Kid Creole. He beat a second-degree murder charge, but he still faces up to 25 years in prison for, I believe, manslaughter. I don't necessarily like reporting on stories like this in hip-hop because, honestly, there are too many media outlets that do that enough already and don't talk enough about the music. But there are a lot of people from different generations, maybe even mine, who knows, who don't know who Kid Creole is. And this is really a shame because this man is pretty old, but, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, respectfully. But to be going to prison now, it just doesn't sound good. It doesn't look good. 25 years in prison for him could mean he dies in prison. It almost guarantees it in a lot of ways. But it's a terrible story. But nevertheless, look up Kid Creole, see what he meant to hip-hop, see why we use the word hip-hop pioneer. But it's sad, man. It's sad. And it kind of, and I ain't going to get on a rant, don't worry. But I'm just saying, not to excuse anything that he is actually guilty of, because I don't know. But when I see our hip-hop pioneers on different stages, not in the courtroom, sometimes it just makes me feel a little bad for the cats who were there to start it all and to have hip-hop be the number one streaming genre, or just the number one genre in music in general, and to know that the people who did it on a ground level, who never will see as much money as a brand new artist today will see, it's just sad. It's just sad to see sometimes when you see some of them and you know they are not as well off as they should be. But this story is sad in itself. So, Pusha T credited Jadakiss for teaching him how to be vulnerable as a rapper. Now, this, I'm not familiar with the story because I didn't really look it up, but we're going to look it up right now. The article is on hiphopdx.com. I'm going to read a little bit to you. This was during a recent conversation with Supreme's new creative director, Tremaine Emery, for Interview Magazine. Pusha T says Kiss's verse on the Locks chest-to-chest freestyle showed him it's possible to be vulnerable on the mic without looking like a loser. It's been a long time since I heard that freestyle from Jadakiss, but Hip Hop DX doing the diligence. I like it. They got the bars here, so let's read the bars. Jada has one of the most poignant verses I've ever heard, Pusha T says, and here's some of the bars. It's a shame he could rhyme Igga, love crime. Every late night, he outside with the 9. You ain't got chips, F the world. You got chips, you could F the next man's girl. Sounds harsh, but they been ripped apart my world. When Jada spit, and this is Pusha T, when Jada spit that bar, that's when I was like, wait a minute. You can be vulnerable and rap and be dope? Because at that point, everyone was such a superhero. Nobody ever lost. I'd never heard anyone admit defeat in rap. That's interesting. Because I gotta believe that's not the first time anyone was vulnerable in their bars in such a way. Now, maybe he's just talking about drug dealer rap, gangster rap. But I'm almost willing to bet you can go back a little bit further. But again, Pusha T is not saying Jadakiss was the first. He's just saying he had never heard anyone be that vulnerable in rap. And I think it probably has a lot to do with him relating to the bars also. Because it's one thing to relate to it as an MC. It's another thing to relate to it as a person who sees themselves as this character that's being described in these bars. There's a difference. So we'll see. Action Bronson says he is on a mission to get the effing respect he deserves with his new upcoming album, Coco Drillo Turbo album. Okay, first of all, when you name your album that, you're already making it difficult for the black community to even know what you're talking about and how you're saying it. This is also on hiphopdx.com, but let's read a little bit. Action Bronson has announced a follow-up to 2020's All for Dolphins. That album was whack, by the way. With a new album titled Coco Drillo Turbo. The project boasts features from Conway the Machine, Rock Marciano, Ghostface Killer, nah, I'm just joking, Hologram, Mayhem Lauren, along with production from The Alchemist, Derringer, Rock Marcy, and Bronson himself. Now, I will say this. This is what I will say. I like the production lineup. He works well with Alchemist. I think he'll sound dope over some Derringer beats. I think he also sounds dope over some Rock Marciano beats. I am not one of those people who hates Action Bronson. I am not the biggest fan of Action Bronson either. For me, he's hit or miss. I know the internet refers to him as Ghostface Light or Diet Ghost, and I get it, and it's very funny. But that Mr. Wonderful album, it hit me in a different way, y'all. And I was a person who was like, I could never like Action Bronson. He sounds way too much like Ghostface. And it wasn't just the voice for me, because I felt like when I listened to Action Bronson prior to the Mr. Wonderful album, that it wasn't just the voice, it was the cadence, it was the way he spit. It was, in some cases, even on the Mr. Wonderful album, skits and things that reminded me of the Wu. So we'll see what all the respect is about. Now, I think it's more so, Action Bronson was kind of sort of on like an underground high at one point. And, he had the cooking show going in the early stages, wound up being very successful for him. And then he made that comment about Ghost. And people already did not like you because you sound like Ghost. And now Ghostface doesn't make a diss record, but he makes one of the most classic Ghostface diss videos of all time. And even though Action Bronson continued to put out music, and both of them sort of moved on, and I believe on Drink Champs, I think Nori asked Ghost, would he work with Action Bronson? He said yes. I think I would like that. I would, if they could be really clever about it, I think I wouldn't mind that. But put some respect on his name. I don't know about that. I never listened to Action Bronson and thought, yo, this cat is nice. I thought he could rhyme. Ghostface isms aside, I thought, oh, he's cool. You know what I'm saying? He didn't sound whack to me. But I never thought he was crazy. I never really anticipated his album. Now, don't get me wrong. After that Mr. Wonderful joint, I checked for him a couple of times, but I just didn't like what I heard. And let me just, for those that are new to this podcast, never heard my take on liking Action Bronson's The Wonder Years, or Mr. Wonderful, my bad. It's the simple fact that I like the sample choices on the album. I thought like the 60s psychedelic funk rock jazz fusion kind of sound was dope for him. And I think Alchemist worked on a lot of that. I really liked it. I was like, yo, he should just make this his sound. You know what I'm saying? Like, he should just have producers draw from this sound, whether they sample something from that time or they just recreate it, with some musicians. But nevertheless, I was like, this is the lane you should be in. This is the lane that gets you out of the, I don't like him because he sounds like Ghost. But he kind of went a little too left for me, for my taste. And it just sounded like, especially that last album, it just sounded like uninspired fluff. And when I say that, I'm not talking about the bars and all that, but I'm just talking about the fact that it just sound really uninspired. He sound disinterested. So me as a listener, I was disinterested. It was just, I don't know. It didn't work for me. Talking about Mr. Wonderful, it's been a while. I should listen to that because I really like that album. So Action Bronson, we shall see. Because your production lineup and some of your features and the fact that you will make that statement got me interested. Definitely has me interested in what they're working on. I just hope, because that wasn't many features, but I just hope it's not like a 6 or 7 song type thing and it's a feature on almost every song. Because then what's the point in making a statement like that if you got all these features? Master P questions Nipsey Hussle getting fake love after his death. He says it's too late. Yeah, I gotta agree with the general. I gotta agree with Master P. I'm not gonna pretend like I was there when Nipsey wrote his first rhyme or, his very first project. I was locked in. I knew he would always be a star. No. I discovered Nipsey's music way before the Victory Lap album, but I discovered his music back when I used to scout music for this hip-hop show, Strictly Hip Hop in Baltimore. I returned to hosting remotely like 2014, 2015, something like that, maybe even 2013. And I was trying to figure out, like, all right, I used to host this show back in the early 2000s, 99, 2000, around that time, right? Probably more so 2000 than 99, but maybe 99. And I just remember, man, I remember like feeling like this is a long time since almost 10 years since I was here doing this. I can't, and look, the South was coming up, but it was mostly trap and not even mostly trap. It was mostly mumble rap that was popular. And I was like, this is a different crop of kids. It's sure there are older generations listening, but to keep this show thriving and what it was when I originally hosted it, I needed to be in the underground circles, finding who was hot that was coming up that maybe I had never heard of. And I came across Nipsey. And I remember I don't remember what song it was, but I remember the first time I heard him, I was like, yo, this dude dope. Like, I like West Coast rappers, but I don't like all of them. And I definitely like gangster rap, especially coming from the West Coast. And I just thought he was dope. And I would play his music. I would always check for him afterwards, even when I stopped doing the show again. And I just remember around the time before Victory Lap, it was like, yo, it looks like Nipsey's finally getting the praise and the look that he's always deserved, right? Going to the Grammys, all of that. And I'm like, wow, this dude did it all by himself. Music's dope, album's dope. And then he died. And the crazy point, he was murdered. Let's keep it a buck. But the crazy part about that was many people who had no idea, they did not know who Nipsey was. He didn't have a record on the radio for them that they recognized him and who he was and heard his album. So what Master P has to understand, right, that there are people who didn't give him a shot and was aware of him, and I think that's who Master P is talking about. But there were people who had no idea. And unfortunately, this is how they discovered him, because they wanted to know, who is this guy that's getting all this love that was murdered in hip hop? Was he dope? Was he good? They just didn't know. And they didn't know because he was right on the cusp of the kind of star power and exposure to everyone else, especially casuals, that makes him a household name, right? He was one song, remix, hit away from becoming a household name that some people who would be interested now know, because he was on the Grammys, or he won a Grammy, or he performed here. So I agree with Master P from the standpoint of the people who maybe have doubted him and didn't give him a chance, didn't give his music a chance. But I still play Nipsey to this day, still play Victory Lap to this day. Again, it's unfortunate how it played out, but when you press play on Victory Lap, it's almost like the final word from Nipsey, and it's perfect. So Pusha T dropped a new song called Neck and Wrist featuring Jay-Z. And like I know, anytime there's new Jay-Z, anytime there's any new Nas, but let's stick to Jay-Z. I just mentioned it because I know that's where y'all like to go. But anytime there's a new Jay-Z record, a surprise Jay-Z album, we haven't had one of those since 444, so it's been a long time. But anytime we get, especially just getting new verses, people go crazy on social media. People go crazy. People stay up late. I don't even know if they listen to it at midnight, but they rush to social media to be the first person to tweet about it. Sometimes you get classic. Sometimes you get the word GOAT thrown around. Sometimes you get Jay-Z needs to stop rapping. You get like these two extremes, extremely negative and extremely positive. Now, I heard the song, right? And really, I only heard it once. I put it on the playlist because I liked it. I basically heard it. My first impression was I liked it. And I threw it in my playlist, and that was the end. It didn't do anything to make me crave a Jay-Z solo. Jay-Z's album with Jay Electronica did that, for sure. But it never happened. It doesn't mean it can't happen. But, it was very divisive. A lot of people fall on different lines. But I think mostly because Jay spoke about the slander coming from Faison Love, Big Worm from Friday, Big Perm, whatever his name was. which to me just was like, whatever, who cares? That, Faison Love is not a new rapper. He's not even a elite actor at that, and he did it on Vlad's couch. Who cares? But what did stand out to me was that I think for maybe the very first time, Jay-Z addressed the question that a lot of people have raised, and I'm pretty sure in this social media age, they think Jay-Z is talking directly to them, but people in hip-hop have been asking this question ever since Biggie died or was murdered. Let's keep it a buck. Would Jay-Z be where he is today if Biggie had lived? Now, I have a entire bonus episode dedicated to that very question, in my opinion. In my opinion, back in the days, it's slightly different, I'll say, than it is today. But the bonus episode is available on patreon.com/hiphopnow, but exclusively to the producers of this podcast. Not because it's a paywall, but because those people have supported this podcast, in some cases, supported it for a year or so. So they've pumped money into this podcast, and one of the bonuses is exclusive access to bonus episodes. So if you care to know what I think about that situation in detail in the form of a podcast episode, and you would like to support this podcast, please click on the link in the description of this episode, patreon.com/hiphopnow. And lastly, Black Star's album was supposed to drop, I believe, last year. I believe a year or two before, we knew about it. We knew Madlib was producing the entire album. No substitutes in the group, right? It is Yasin Bey, formerly known as Mos Def, and Talib Kweli handling the bars. We heard about the hold up, the sampling. Like, we were like, when are we going to get it? If you are a subscriber to this podcast, maybe you're new and you just subscribed. Thank you. But if you've been subscribed to this podcast and you've been listening week to week for many years, you know, like I know, that every year, at least in recent years, I do preview shows. And they do pretty well for me, right? In January, I do a preview of the new year that features things I expect, I want to happen, and a couple of shots in the dark. And I said to you, and I probably said it last year, but so what? That Black Star's album was definitely coming out this year. And now it's true. Black Star's new album, second, if you're counting, in their catalog, produced entirely by Madlib. The album is entitled No Fear of Time, which sounds really dope, like just really hip-hop. Will be dropping on May 3rd. And if you are listening to it right now because you're from the future, get your ass out of here. We don't care because we haven't heard it yet. Now, there's one caveat. It's a 9-song album, but that's not it. That's cool. It could be 9 songs as long as, I feel fulfilled. It's cool. It's expected to arrive on May 3rd exclusively via Luminary. Now, this is troubling. This is very troubling because I get it. Pandemic happened. Not a lot of MCs and performers were working. Probably in a lot of cases, they trying to get some money back. Some money they would have had, they're trying to get it back through deals. But to make this highly anticipated album available exclusively on Luminary is a mistake. It's a win for them as far as their bank accounts and their sense of financial security, but it's a loss, and I'm saying loss, but there's probably people who will just join Luminary to get it, so I get it. I get why they did it. don't forget, Jay did it a while back with the deal with with Sprint. Everybody went over to Sprint so they can get a free copy of Jay-Z's album, which is the most ridiculous thing ever because it's available everywhere. But for those who don't know, Luminary is mostly like a subscription-based podcasting site. The subscription model for podcasts have been knocking on the door of podcasting since forever. It exists in some cases. It hasn't dominated the industry, right? I mean, you don't necessarily have to pay for this podcast. I appreciate the support, but you don't have to do that. I can't see a person, or at least I don't believe, but it doesn't mean it won't happen. But I can't see a person who doesn't already have Luminary and is used to paying subscriptions for, podcasts, because they also have an exclusive podcast on Luminary. And I have never heard it because I'm a podcast listener. But it's been free for too long. And there's nothing they could be doing on that show to make me want to pay to hear it. Same thing with this album. Same thing with Donda 2. I can wait, or I can go ski mask way. It's up to y'all. It's up to y'all. But nevertheless, I'm not telling you not to support and go ahead and do it. But can I just buy it? Right? Can I support that way? What happened to just let me buy it? Now I hope that's the case. Because I don't want to go through Luminary I put my music in iTunes. Come on, y'all, what y'all doing? Killing the buzz. Does your fan base care to go through this? That's the question you have to ask. And maybe I got the fan base messed up. I'm thinking late 90s fan base. It's a whole nother fan base that got their wallets ready. Because that could be the case. And I could be wrong. I mean, when they did the podcast, maybe they have numbers to support the fact that people were willing to pay to go listen to Dave Chappelle's podcast, which featured Talib Kweli and I think sometimes Yasin Bey. Maybe some people were just willing to do that. But I think it sucks in a lot of ways because though whoever owns Luminary might be giving out the bag, you just never hear about this show. And Donda 2 was all the rage until after it was released because most people said, well, I would have checked it out, but, I use Tidal. I would have checked it out, but I use Apple Music. I'm not buying a stem player to hear this album that I'm not even sure is good. Now, it would be a tragedy if Black Star's album wasn't good considering the people involved. But we're going to find a way to hear it anyway. That's going to do it for me for this week. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at VegasWorldINC. And please know that this podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts. All you have to do is type in the search bar, Hip Hop Now Podcast, hit subscribe, and stay locked into weekly hip-hop content. Until next time, y'all, I am not a critic. I'm a fan. Peace.